There is so much evidence now that supports the idea that we are actually living in a very complex simulation. And in this video, I'm going to be going over how you can start to control the simulation if you just give me a little bit of your time to help you with the awareness of what's really going on, the laws and principles that run the simulation itself, and how you can actually begin to utilize these laws and principles to your advantage. Because believe it or not, as a conscious being, you actually can influence reality by influencing the simulation. And so in this video, I'm going to go over exactly how you can do this, how you can begin to influence your reality stream, the simulation, the game, whatever we want to call it, so that more favorable things start showing up in your life. And this is something that works every time for every single person that starts to apply these laws. And don't get it twisted. Even if you don't consciously apply these laws or do certain things that allow for them to work in your favor, they are still acting in your life every moment, just in an unconscious way, which means it's going to be heading you in a direction that doesn't benefit you or is a part of someone else's agenda or so on and so forth. And so in my eyes, it behooves us, we're encouraged to learn what these principles and laws are, and then to start intentionally doing certain things that help us to create more of in our life. Now, what does that look like? That means if you want more finances, increasing your finances and becoming whatever you want to call it, more wealthy, abundant, and rich. That means improving your relationships and also finding the right relationships. We've worked with people, for example, who have found the love of their lives and have started families with these people now that just kind of came out of nowhere because they learned how to manipulate and control the simulation. We've had people who have completely transformed their health, lost weight, all of this different stuff. All of this becomes possible when you learn how the game operates, what the real rules to the game are, and then how to actually move in accordance to those rules to get the results that you're looking for. In our reality creation program, Max It, we're having people getting results that they are saying would take them like a year to get before in a few weeks. You can really accelerate your results when you learn how to get to the core of this game and learn how to influence it rather than trying to just maneuver and manipulate the things that are already here. And so we're going to go over how you can actually do this. And again, if you just pay attention for the allotted time here, you're going to come out with a higher level of awareness and tools that you can use to start actually changing your life or influencing the simulation, whichever way you want to put it. We now have the data to support that we live in essentially a virtual construct or a virtual reality that operates similar to that of a simulation. Now, a lot of people like to argue this or whatever. There's plenty of data out there you can look at. I would recommend the documentary The Simulation Hypothesis, which presents a lot of this, shows the scientists that are presenting the data, many really famous past scientists like Werner Heisenberg, Max Planck, and so on, giving evidence to support this as well through their theories and what they discovered. But ultimately, understanding that we live in this simulation-like universe allows us to start operating in a different way than most in order to bring new things into our lives. You see, if our lives are very much like a simulation or, at least in this form, like a virtual construct, that would mean that in theory, we could program certain things into the game to show up in the game as we're going through our everyday life. And so the way I want you to actually think about this is you are in this game. Again, you're in this virtual reality. You can think of it like Sims, like you're this character in the game. However, because you're in the game, you are kind of just observing that world, the world that we're in, and it feels very real to you. You're playing this character in this game. But there's always a player who's actually controlling the character. And what I want you to think about is that you have two sides of yourself. You have this kind of physical character that you're playing. This is my character. His name is Dave, and you can kind of see me. I'm this physical being. I'm moving around in this physical time and space. But there's also this other part of yourself known as the player. And you can think of this like the part of you that's off the screen and is kind of looking down at the game, understanding it's a game, and can have direct influence over the game if they so choose. The problem is most people are so immersed in the character, the person that's on screen, in the game, in their five senses, in the physical world, that they never recognize that there's this other part of them that is actually connected to something much deeper. And that is the non-physical part of our reality. Think of it this way. The game or the simulation is a subset of a much larger superset. Now, what that means is the subset is contained within the superset. It can't exist without the superset. The superset, for example, could be the computer, with the subset the game. Without the computer, the game couldn't exist. It is born out of the computer. It's allowed to be programmed based on the parameters of the computer, and it comes from that. It's not just there by itself, right? And so the subset here being the simulation or virtual reality, and then the superset being the computer. Now, Now, the way we can also think of this is the subset is physical matter reality. So this game that we're playing in this thing we call life, we use our five senses to kind of interact with the physical world. And again, a lot of us get immersed in just the character, who we see ourselves as in this physical game. However, there's another part that is the superset, and this is the non-physical. So basically everything that's not the physical. Again, most people think the world is physical, our lives are physical, the universe is physical, because again, we're so immersed and so habitualized in just using our five physical senses that it seems like everything is just that. However, what if I was to tell you that our universe, our reality, is actually mainly non-physical? In fact, it is closer to 99.999999% empty space and energy, i.e. non-physical, and the rest of that percentage physical, 0.00001% physical reality. And so many people are so immersed in this physical matter reality as being the only thing, and yet it's the only tiny fraction of what's really going on. In fact, there's many scientists who have said that if you were to remove all the empty space and energy, all of the non-physical from every person on the planet, so you just took all of that out and you were left with the physical stuff that people think that all of this is, you would actually only be left with enough physical material to fit within a tiny sugar cube. That is how physical your world actually is. It's actually virtual. It's actually mainly non-physical. And when we start to learn how to play the game from the non-physical, when we learn the rules to the game from that perspective, we suddenly are able to start influencing the simulation, which again is just the subset or physical matter reality. And so once you learn about the non-physical and learn how you can do certain things in the non-physical, as the player, you start to influence the character and what shows up on screen or in the game, i.e. your life, when you do this. Now, you do not need to take my word for this. I know this works. I've taken so many clients through our program Max It where they've done this, and in a few weeks, their game is starting to change in radical ways, and we'll pop up a few different results that we've been seeing from that, and we have videos and things. I won't play the videos here, but you can check out some of the other ones down below in the first link if you're interested in joining. But this absolutely works, but again, you don't need to take my word for it. Test it out for yourself. If you do what we're going over here, you will start noticing the influence that you're having on the game and the changes that will take place. Okay, so we're living in this simulation-like universe or reality or game or movie, whatever you want to call it, virtual reality. How do we actually begin to control this? Now, again, if you need more convincing on that we're living in a virtual reality or virtual-like, I don't want you to think like, oh, it's like Mario, right? Again, that's what we've created based on what we think that is and what we've been able to do. Just think of our actual virtual reality as so much more complex than that, to the point we can't really fathom it except to kind of be able to point in the direction that we believe it's coming from, right? We can create essentially fragmented versions, or fractal versions, I should say, of kind of the bigger thing, if that makes sense. But if you want to learn even more about that and simulation hypothesis and all that, I will link a video at the end which goes over more of the data and more details and everything else. So that'll be very useful. But for those of you who are open to the idea of, okay, it's a simulation of virtual reality, or already are convinced and know this to be the case, let's move into how you can start actually controlling the simulation. Because again, this is all interesting, but ultimately, it's not about just having information or it being interesting or entertaining. We want it to be practical so that you're actually starting to see results in your life. So here's how you actually control the simulation. Remember what I said about reality mainly being non-physical. So what is the non-physical and what is it when it applies to us? So we know that we have our five physical senses that help us interact on the physical plane or in the game or in the subset or in the virtual construct of virtual reality. But we have much more available to us and much more abilities than we are led to believe. The reason you can't sense these or aren't aware of these is because you weren't taught about them. If you were taught these things from a kid, like we probably should have been, you would be really good at them, you'd be aware of them, and you'd be controlling your reality right now in much easier ways. But again, the physical are those five senses, mainly how you're interacting in the physical world, but the non-physical mainly consists of what we can call the mental realm and the spiritual realm. And so I want you to think of yourself like a three-part being. You have the physical, we're all aware of that, the physical matter reality, you're interacting on this physical plane. Don't have to convince anyone of that because most of us have grown up believing that's all there is. Then you have the mental. Now you have thoughts, you have imaging, you have visualizations. What's that? Because that's not physical, is it? There's no physicality to that. You don't think something and it immediately appears in the physical, or you can touch it, you can taste it, all of these kinds of things. You can certainly elicit certain chemicals and different things through thoughts. You can think of something and feel like you can taste it. But ultimately, thoughts are not physical, right? So this is thought realm that we also seem to be able to activate. You're having thoughts all day long, about 60 to 80,000 thoughts. Every single day is the kind of estimate or the average. And most people, because they're not trained or because they're just habitualizing everything, have about 90 to 95% the same thoughts from one day to the next, which is also why a lot of people don't change their reality, which we'll go into why that is the case with this. But you also have the spiritual part of yourself. And I want you to think of the spiritual part, kind of the final piece of this kind of triangle here that makes up you, as your connection to something bigger. And like we mentioned, this connection to something bigger is your connection to the superset. Now you could also call it your connection to the divine, to God, to the creator, to the all. It doesn't really matter what you use there, but it is kind of your line to something greater. It's where you could ultimately gain more information, inspiration, all these other things. And it is also the feeling center. It is the emotional part of yourself, so energy and motion, right? So you have these two other planes of existence that you exist on, but most people don't train themselves to deliberately do anything on these places or intentionally do things that are going to help them to create. But it is actually these two parts of yourself that have the biggest influence in what shows up in your game. And yet most people are focused on the physical, thinking if, I punch through things in life and just hustle and grind, or just, sit and hope things will happen, things will happen. But it won't. And I'm sure you can attest to that if you've tried doing that in the past. And so your mental and spiritual are causing the effects that are happening on your physical. Again, when you go to the mental realm intentionally and you go to the spiritual realm intentionally, you do certain things on those planes of your existence, it's like you are tuning out of the character and going into the player. And you are now more dictating what's going to show up on your screen in the game for your character to be in. Also, when you gain more control over the mental and spiritual side of yourself, even as you're the character and you're in that kind of place, you're able to wake up much more often and realize, oh, I'm not this character, I'm just playing this role right now. And you can be more aware as you're going through the game, which is going to be very, very helpful. Here is a quote that I always keep in mind because it's very, very true. You get what you think about most of the time. This is a quote that was popularized by The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And it's so true, especially if people who are creating reality in the way that they want for themselves, they are very deliberate with their thoughts. They use thought power to their advantage because they understand, whether they could describe it in this way or not, but they do understand that their thoughts create their reality. And what's really happening is they're tuning into the player at that point. They're basically deciding, what is it I want to show up in my game? And they're focusing in on that. And then there's a spiritual part of yourself. And so they also know that they need to feel good most of the time. They know that the better they feel, the more connection they have to that higher power, that divine, remember that connection to something bigger. The better you feel, the closer you are to that source. The worse you feel, the further away you are, which is why you feel worse. This is a feedback mechanism. It's called your emotional guidance system. That's why when you're kind of lower on that scale, when you're feeling bad, guilty, shame, it feels crappy and terrible because it's encouragement to try and raise you and to kind of get you to do things differently so that you can raise yourself up. That kind of scale, right? To feel better now. And so the way you control a simulation is, first and foremost, you need to start remembering that you get what you think about most of the time and start thinking better thoughts. Now, this can be very hard if you don't know what to think about. Well, one other thing to have is make sure you have an aim. If you don't have something you're aiming for, it's going to be very hard to focus your thoughts because you're like a paper boat on the ocean just being thrown around by the waves. You're rudderless, you have no influence because you don't even know where you want to go. So that's the first thing. You need to know. You have to have a goal. You have to have a dream. You have to have a vision. And I promise you it's in there somewhere within you. Again, this is something we help clients with. I've made videos on how to start this process. And again, you can find those on the channel, but you need to know where you're going, because then you'll know where to direct your thoughts and where to direct, again, that spiritual part of yourself as well. And I'm telling you right now, this will make all of the difference. This, again, is what connects you to that 99.9+% of what's actually in reality. Again, remember that quote, that if you were to remove all the energy and empty space from every person on Earth, again, 8 billion or whatever we're up to now, you would be left with enough physical stuff to fit within a sugar cube. Reality is not physical. It is pretty much conclusive at this point, and the data is there to back it up. And so if you're still moving, trying to create your life by being only physical, you're never ever going to see the changes that you want to see. And so here is a challenge I'm going to give you if you want help with this, and that is to start monitoring your thoughts and your feelings. And I'm going to show you how to do this a little bit better. The first thing is I want you to take stock of what are the things I'm investing in, my time and attention and everything else that is kind of making me think negatively. For example, are you watching things like the news? Are you getting into political drama or any other kind of drama? Are you consuming things that cause you to think in a certain way? Start taking notice of how you think in different environments and ask yourself, do I really want to succumb to these thoughts? Because those thoughts are things. They are creating or destroying the life in which you want to live. Most people are thinking about what they don't want most of the time and therefore create what they don't want in their life. They're thinking about lack and are confused when lack shows up. They're thinking about drama in their relationships and are so confused when there's drama in their relationships. They're thinking about poor health and are so confused when poor health is in their life, because you get what you think about most of the time, right? They're feeling bad all the time and confused when more feeling bad comes in, right? They're feeling guilty and confused when more guilt comes in, because what you focus on will magnify in your life. You know, you can think of the universe almost like an Amazon delivery service. If you give it something, it's going to give you it back. It says, oh, I want guilt. How are you saying you want guilt? By continually sending out guilt or shame or anger or fear or whatever else. Have you ever noticed, for example, someone who's in fear all the time seems to just find new things to be fearful of? Let's say the solution to something they were fearful of is brought about, and it's like, oh, okay, I feel relief. And then a day later, they have something they're equally scared of, or just another thing that takes its place? Yes, because the more you're in that emotion, life just continually brings you things to continually experience that emotion. Because as far as the universe or the system or the game is concerned, you're continually asking for that to be programmed into the game. And this is why it's so crucial to monitor what you're thinking about and how you're feeling. Now, with the feeling part of this, you don't need to feel like I need to feel bliss or whatever else it is all of the time. We can do this in degrees, right? So if you just feel better than you were feeling, then you're going to get there, right? You'll be surprised if you just aim to feel a little bit better rather than trying to go from 0 to 100. I'm in fear, so I'm going to go to love. It's very hard to do. It's very far away from each other. But if you go, I'm in fear, I'm going to go to anger, go up the Hawking scale, if you know what that is. Then I want to go to pride, then I want to go to courage, then acceptance or willingness, neutrality before that, wisdom. You'll find you go up pretty quickly. And one thing that's very helpful, you've all heard it before, but it's appreciation or gratitude. And again, a lot of people think this doesn't work because they think they have to be grateful for these grandiose things. No, you can be grateful for anything. And so if you do gratitude in degrees, let's say you're in a fear-based place and you remember gratitude can help you, well, you have to, in the moment, be genuinely grateful for something. And so don't think like, I'm so grateful for my life. You're not going to believe it because you're in fear. You're not grateful for your life right now, and that's okay. So just find something you could be grateful for, that kind of next thing that you can reach for and genuinely be grateful for. And then once you have it, you're now here. Okay, where can I be grateful for next? Can I reach here? You probably can. And just keep doing that for whatever's in range, the best next thing, and you'll find very quickly that your emotions will start to change, and that spiritual part of yourself will start working for you. Ultimately, the more that you can tune into the player, to start thinking thoughts that are more aligned to your vision, to your goals, to start feeling better by doing those two things, it is now like you've planted a seed in the ground because you have a direction, and those thoughts and those feelings are actually watering that seed consistently, allowing it to grow. And I promise you, before long, if you do this and you maintain it, you will start seeing changes in your game, in the virtual reality, in the simulation, like we've mentioned. Now, speaking of the simulation, if that's something you want to learn a little more about, like, wait, reality is like a simulation? You mean like a video game? Well, not exactly. Again, it's way more complex and well beyond what we could truly fathom on how it works to its most intricate level. But it is similar. And if you want some more information on that and some more tools, I'd go watch this video next where we give us some more evidence on this, go over a bit of the simulation hypothesis, which kind of shows the data towards this. And I also go over more ways in which you can control the simulation. Again, all this means is so that you can control your reality, create what you want, and start living the life you really want to live.